interdependence of the world's the growing interdependence of the world's political, economic, and cultural relations, along with the increasingly diverse character of the American citizenry in general. And the students of Hunter College in particular make it imperative that Hunter undergraduates be exposed to a wide range of intellectual traditions, perspectives, and concerns arising from all corners of the globe. The emergence of sizable bodies of scholarship in recent decades reflecting that intellectual array makes it important for Hunter to present them. Uh-oh, you're blocking. I can't see it. To present them as an integral part of the education of its undergraduates. So, as a whole, this is what we were doing as our P&D up until 2024. And as you can see, there's nothing terribly wrong with that. It seems like a good idea, right? It's all well and good, but how this translated into practice was again not problematic, but it was as you can see, it'll come across as slightly limited and not exactly what we wanted to be doing in the early 2020s. So how this oh, what has happened here? It's gone out of order. Okay, this is what this translated into. What we had was what is going on here? I'm a bad PowerPoint person. I'm just trying to move. We had four categories, right? We had A, B, C, and D. And I'm not going to read all of these because what I have underlined here is what became important for students to know. We had A, which was categories of non-European people, non-European categories. We had categories of people focusing in the United States, groups in the United States. You had women and gender, and you had the European categories, right? So we kept them in this kind of way. So intellectual tradition scholarship focusing on these kinds of categories. And so the limits here, as we saw them when we started this process, or at least I saw them, right? You can have uh, uh, there's lots of overlap here, right? So you can study women and gender issues and intellectual traditions of Europe, right? And so what this translated for students was just getting double credit or double categories, right? Or these things, but not getting double credit for them, and it didn't reflect the current or focus intersectionality of what was going on in the real type of pluralism and diversity that was going about, right? And so what then happened was you had the pandemic. So I'm going to have to sort of figure this out because it's out of order. You had a pandemic, right? And things happened, right? And you had George Floyd, you had all of these things going on, right? And universities across America were looking at what they were teaching and how we were doing it, not just universities all across the world. And so President Raab at the time called together a presidential task force on racial justice. And they came and they it was a big process, and I think you can find the whole some of the findings throughout if you search on Hunter Web. But at this point in the career in my career, I was the chair of the uh, GER committee, and this task force came in and gave us a presentation. And they had two overarching questions that seemed to emerge: how to balance the needs to address racial justice in curriculum across disciplines while recognizing racial and ethnic studies as specialized fields of study, and how to think about the structure of our curriculum such that students think about racial justice in their fields of study rather than as separate requirements disconnected from their primary active work. And this is where the GER committee came in. So we started to think about how we were looking at our general education requirement and things like pluralism and diversity and really what that meant. Right. And so what GER really was looking at, do we really at this point really want to be looking at pluralism and diversity as studying of just sort of groups of people? Is that how we're still considering pluralism and diversity? Are we looking at sort of, let's look at African Americans as a group? If you're exposed to that, does that mean you have some pluralism and diversity? And we thought an emphasis on social justice might be a better approach to do this. So the GER committee had a long process. We look back at a Mellon project, which is a really interesting read. If you look at from 2010, we formed a P&D subcommittee, which consisted of members both of the GER and of members from outside of the committee, both having a broad representation at all levels. And we involved a wide array of Senate committees and administrative people and department chairs. And were able to develop a new set of categories. So now let me do this with a Senate framework. And I won't read this to you, but what it does is it gets at some of that, what I was just talking about, moving away from viewing categories of people and to as the idea of focus, but moving social justice and issues and intersectionality as the type of focus that we are interested in talking, which creates more dynamic courses and really reflects the dynamism of what is going on at Hunter in these programs that are offering. So, women and gender studies, for example, are offering these really dynamic courses that that catch a lot of these things, and they're not just focusing on women. It's these broad sort of issues, and they can go into these categories. And so we were looking at some of these things. So this is the introduction to the framework that was passed by the Senate and in on this day. So you can go find that there. And I'll just show you just very briefly. This is how we have then come up with four categories that are not based on these general loose these groups as the defining categories, but more broad issues. And as a result of this, the groups aren't the outcome. What we then did was create outcomes. So in these slides, what I've done, and I'm just going to breeze through them, I've given you the title of the category, the description right on top, and below you have three outcomes. So it helps define more clearly what we are looking for and what we are trying to do in our, which aligns us both with the pedagogical uh, landscape of higher education and with what is actually going on at Hunter College. So we have four categories, okay, and we included the fourth, which we hope will we thought would allow for broad participation. That's the history in a nutshell that I have, and I went on way too long. Anyway, I can talk more if you want, but anyway, that's all what I wanted to do. Thanks.
Thank you, Larry. I think I'm next, and I'm going to try to set up my PowerPoint presentation through screen share, so bear with me while I do that. Uh, Here we go. So I just want to thank ACERT for really being at the forefront of ensuring that we keep this conversation going and specifically its importance for our moment. And one of the things that I wanted to do in the few moments that we have is to just give you a frame through which to understand the broader history of how this program came to be. So I'm really glad that Larry sort of framed it in terms of our present and what the frameworks were in our present. So I'm sort of doing a prehistory of that in a couple of minutes, which will be really interesting, but I hope that we have a conversation about how this prehistory really connects with our moment. Um,
Vlad,
so,
I'm
yeah,
sorry, but the view is of your whole screen. Could you expand your PowerPoint just to be the full screen for us?
let me do that. And I'm sorry I
Great.
can't. Is that a little better?
That's great. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for letting me know, Christina. And then the second thing I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about the gaps that were identified in the report. And I want to use two representative examples, one from uh, Africana, Puerto Rican, and Latino studies, and also gender and sexuality studies. I want to share too something that I got from Lisa, who was so instrumental in getting this project off the ground, along with Larry, and making sure that we had a rigorous process for both ensuring faculty, student, and staff participation, because without it, I don't think it would have passed, quite frankly. And there were moments too, right? So it wasn't that people were necessarily averse to it but some folks felt that why reinvent the wheel if it's already working? So I want to share with you some of the reasons why that wheel may have needed a little bit of inflating as we move forward. So this is the wonderful report from 1993, if you can imagine that. And that report outlined a series of goals. And I want to share with you what President Leclerc at the time stated in the report, and I'm happy to make it available to anybody who's interested. We're doing a PDF again. Initially, we had done one and it got misplaced, or the person in question couldn't find it. So I'll do the PDF again because I think it's an important part of why this history matters, and it particularly matters today. So Leclerc recognized that there were massive transformations in American higher education. And one of the ways to engage that was to, in his estimation, put Hunter College at the forefront of that. So I want to share first that Hunter was the only institution at the time, and I looked last night in preparation for this, and very few have more than two equivalents of what we call the P&D requirement. So we have four, and I think that's significant for lots of different reasons. Leclerc said, and I'm going to quote, I don't know if you're able to see it, and I know that some of you might be on your iPhones, so I'll share the quote from Leclerc from 1993. And it says, if our people can now use this report to create an authentic sense of community, one that respects but also transcends individual and group identities, then we will have created something unique in American higher education. That will be a proud legacy for us all. So I want you to consider the importance of its projective quality, what it attempted to do in terms of American higher education. And if you were to read the full report, you would see absolutely all constituents and interested parties were involved: staff, faculty, students, folks from public safety. It was amazing to see that coalition of folks coming together to really reimagine what education might look like as a practice of freedom that is inclusive of all communities that we as a public institution ostensibly serve. So part of that impetus really began as a result of the first gains made by the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which has progressively been delimited by SCOTUS, and most recently, of course, with the question of redistricting. If anybody's following this, we know that this is a difficult time in terms of representation in meaningful ways and what education can do as a practice of freedom. And that tradition really goes back to John Dewey. And I oftentimes remind students that it's not just the Dewey Decimal System, and then they go, what? Because, they don't even remember that certain sections of the library have, PQ, PS, and so forth. But one of the things that Dewey's emphasis on education meant was how to inculcate in citizens and citizens in the making a version of the world before them in this project called democracy that really didn't replicate the monarchical structures of the old world. In other words, for Dewey, it was essential that a citizenry and a citizenry in the making needed to be educated. Without education, we had very limited foundations for how to proceed and be in the world. So the position and statement on diversity said as follows: at a time when issues about the content of our curriculum with respect to peoples who have been excluded or distorted in or by the academy are coming to the fore, there is a concerted attack on the academy itself. I'll remind you, this is from 1993, and look at how relevant it is to our moment. It continues at a time when new scholarship emerges from or about women, African Americans, Latinos, and Asian Americans that challenges our hearts and minds. We get attacks on political correctness and charges of watering down scholarship. So we see from this moment, what I'm asking you to consider is the culmination of a project that really began certainly prior to the Civil Rights of 1964, but because of the legal status and focus of higher education and the importance of higher education initiatives that included greater inclusion, then this project is nothing short of really visionary as I see it. And I oftentimes remind students when we're glossing through this history that, for example, in a university up the street, as it were, like Columbia University, we had what was called in the history department the Dunning School. And the Dunning School basically said that after Reconstruction, a Black failure to participate as citizens meant that they really were ill-equipped for citizenship. So we had whole generations trained on versions of the past that really didn't take into account the multiplicity of engagement with questions of evidence. What are we going to value? What is the status of the human in relation to education? And something really significant that is coterminous with that emerged, which is the Moral Act of the late 19th century, which asked that we all have institutions of higher learning. So the Land Grant State Institution Act began as a need to really inculcate in citizens in the making an informed type of engagement with education. So I know that my time is up, and that ringer is going to scare the lights out of me, as it did when it rang for Larry. And I'm happy to share this information with you. But I have a really cool video that I don't know if I'm going to have time for, Christina, before that timer
I just
rings out.
stopped it, so it won't scare anyone.
Okay. So this doesn't oftentimes work for me because I don't know why, depending on the computer that I'm on. So I'm going to stop the screen share and I'm going to share the video that I'm going to that I had queued up for you. And this particular video comes from
Right. I'd be missed this
okay.
way to you.
Oh, wait, hold on. I have to line this up. This is a video from Polly Thistlethwaite, who was interviewed in 1995. And it gives you a sense of the importance of women and gender studies and questions of diversity. So I'm going to do the screen share again, now that I've sort of set it up. And here we go. Can you see it? Great. Thanks, Gina.
In my brain. Here we are in the HQ 75s and HQ 76s. So if you don't know, that's the Library of Congress classification number for lesbian and gay life. And you notice that this part of the stacks is pretty well wrecked. That's because it's heavily used, rifled, as a matter of fact. Gay and lesbian people have a very important relationship with the printed word, because it's through the printed word that we often find ourselves and our identities and that we discover who we are. I know that for me, growing up in Decatur, Illinois, it was when I went to the library and found the handful of gay books that they had at the library, that's when I first sort of started putting it together in my head that the feelings that I was having was a universal or a more universal thing than I thought it might be. There are thousands and thousands of coming out stories that involve finding the word gay or lesbian or homosexual in the dictionary or finding a book about it in the library.
Did I mess up? I did.
Welcome to Hunter College Library.
Okay. I'm going to make this available in the chat, but you know, this time capsule is really fascinating to me. It is the question of discovery as seen through the lens of gender and sexuality studies, but also how all our students come into a sense of the social. And oftentimes they may not see themselves, for example, as Latinx or what have you. But it's in learning this deeper history and our interconnectedness where they can begin to see that the social mirror before them really reflects their experience, that we begin to build a stronger and really more rigorous democratic commons and the type of imagination that would allow us to parse truth from fiction in ways that we should be doing in higher education. So I'm excited to have been part of this project. And again, I'm tipping my hat to Larry, to Lisa, and all those who are continuing this good work, like Gina right now, and so many of you here in this panel. So thanks. I'll just pause here.
I
Do you want
think
me to
next is
just
Chris.
jump
Yeah,
in? Yeah.
please.
I didn't know if there was going to be a transition or not. So, hi, everybody. If you don't know me, I'm Chris Mitchell. I'm in Women and Gender Studies, and I'm also co-chair of the undergraduate course of study committee. And I just want to thank all the speakers and everybody that was part of putting together this P&D curriculum. I think it's a really rigorous revision of what came before, and adds a layer of depth that I don't think was present when some of those thematics were a little more content based. We sometimes had these sort of tokenizing buckets. And I feel like this new curriculum really gets us out of that and sort of thinks about connecting different forms of scholarship and different disciplines. And I have to say, I'm very appreciative of this curriculum because it transformed my life as well. I'm from a small town in West Texas. I was deeply closeted when I arrived at college in the late 90s. I had gotten a very monochromatic version of Texas history and US history. And it was my women's history teacher and my Chicana literature professor who really changed my life in that first semester. And very sadly, the chancellor of Texas Tech University, where I'm an alum, has essentially outlawed the teaching of these classes, which even in the 1990s were fairly well-established parts of that curriculum. So I am really proud of Hunter for expanding this curriculum at a time when other colleges and universities have been backing away. To me, it's just absolutely shameful and cowardly, but it also does a huge amount of damage to those student populations who will never have access to, essentially the truth. So, now that I can get off my soapbox a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about the forms that P&D uses for curriculum committee approvals, and some of the best practices for getting your courses approved for pluralism and diversity. And I want to just kind of think through some of the. I'm gonna do a screen share of this form, and I want to think through some of these learning outcomes in some of the ways that you could think about mapping your own curriculum onto the P&D curriculum, or also thinking about revisiting some of the classes you offer. One thing that we did with the new P&D dispensation is that we reviewed our learning outcomes in many of the classes that we felt had done a very good job of teaching pluralism and diversity. Uh,
Chris, I'm
yes,
so sorry to interrupt, but do you mind magnifying this for us?
yes, is it? Let me
It's,
see.
I mean,
Oh, I see. Yeah.
thank you so
Yeah, you
much.
bet. At any rate, these are some ways that you could revisit your own curriculum. And so we have used this to kind of rethink some of what we're teaching, and some of the ways that we address these learning outcomes. So the course that I'm going to use is a masculinities course, which is a pretty standard course for gender and sexuality studies departments. It's a course that at Hunter is cross-listed with political science, and it has some American studies, US history dimensions because I'm the professor for this course. So the P&Ds that it fit were or that best fit, we felt like, were the P&Ds related to citizenship and intersectionality. And so those are the P&Ds that we're going to focus on today. In our department, the best practices in our committee rather, the best practices that we've identified include, a detailed syllabus with learning outcomes that align with the P&D learning outcomes, and naming those learning outcomes specifically in the proposal, and also linking those to specific readings and also specific assignments. So that information should be on the syllabus, and I'm going to just jump ahead really quickly to the text of the masculinity syllabus itself. Um, the I apologize, the course description is a little wordy, but the course learning outcomes, which we revised in part with the new P&D curriculum in mind, actually became a lot more rigorous prior to the new P&D learning outcomes. The older ones were, I mean, they were fine learning outcomes, but they were really kind of content based. And what we wanted to do with these learning outcomes is, make them a little bit more aligned with, essentially the language of Bloom's taxonomy, and sort of more complex forms of learning, including analysis, synthesis, evaluation. So those are listed here. And then we mapped those onto a P&D along with specific readings, which, I'm happy to share this document with you, but those are listed in the sort of bibliography of the syllabus itself. So in addition, there's information about specific assignments, and so that's listed on the syllabus. And when I wrote the P&D form, I tried to use language that was in the syllabus, but I also expanded in places where I felt like there needed to be more explanation, mostly with the assignments that are used. And so, this is kind of an example of what I developed for each of these learning outcomes. So for residency, citizenship, and human rights, we're being asked to explain the historical, social, cultural, economic, and political context for how rights and responsibilities are accorded to citizens in the making, the undocumented and or marginalized people. So I connected this to the course learning outcome 3 to analyze the meanings of masculinity in the context of citizenship, labor, culture, and the dynamics of social and cultural belonging and alienation. Citizenship and masculinity are key components of the course. An entire unit is devoted to U.S. nationalism, race, and immigration. And then I talk about some specific readings that I use as case studies to talk about citizenship. A lot of this course deals with the history of the Second World War and the ways in which militarism, race, ethnicity, immigration kind of reshaped the idea of, who is an American. So I used those readings, which are, broadly in conversation with one another. And then I listed a specific assignment learning outcome. Students must be able to lead or facilitate discussions on these readings. And they also have the option to write about these themes. So, in some ways, having those 3 components made this proposal legible to the committee. And so this is kind of what we're looking for in the UCSC. So, I can say more. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about this, but it gives you just kind of a broad understanding of how this is read by curriculum committees and what they're looking for to see that those learning outcomes, and also the content of the course itself satisfy the new pluralism and diversity requirements. So thanks very much.
Thank you. And we've got Michael next. That was so helpful.
Oh yeah, I mean, so I don't have a fancy PowerPoint. I think I just wanted to speak from the perspective of somebody who has been, trying to adapt some of our courses so that they will fit this requirement, and to talk about that experience, right, and thinking about how these issues influence my discipline. Right. I think that the new pluralism and diversity guidelines, one of the things that they really help is that they included explicit outcomes that could be assessed. And I think that that really was helpful in pushing people to think about not just, the reaction you will always get from faculty members initially is like, well, of course we talk about these things. Of course this is in our course. But, you know, actually thinking, looking at what you do and thinking like, wait, is there a devoted section of the lecture that actually looks at these issues? Is there an assignment where we actually see whether or not students are thinking about these issues? Actually having to do that work is was very useful. Right. So my discipline, I'm in political science, but specifically I'm in international relations. Um, and international relations is an interesting vantage point. In a lot of ways, you would think that pluralism, diversity could really come in, but there are certain traditions of teaching international relations where you actually ignore a lot of marginalized people. You ignore the a lot of transnational processes. Like my undergrad, when I was taking international relations in undergrad, our like entry course was strategies of statecraft, right? It was about the high politics, which is of course diplomats in fancy leather, high-backed chairs, swirling brandy, and making decisions. Um, and so what thinking about how we could address IR in a broader way was really useful for us. Um, right. And so partly that helped us shift. Um, there's a certain kind of IR scholar that maybe is mostly interested in studying when the bombs are going to drop. Um, but there is also a lot of other stuff going on in international relations, like international political economy, globalization, migration. And so uh, in a way, the pluralism and diversity requirements helped us push for a broader introduction to international relations that focused on a broader range of issues and made us think explicitly, what are the readings that we have that are communicating these themes? What are the assignments that are actually going to cover these things? One of the areas where that really helped, surprisingly, international relations as a discipline does not spend as much time as it should on the politics of migration. Right. And one of the ways with any class at Hunter that you can get an incredible response from students is really centering migration. When people read about, oh, the Treaty of Westphalia and this, they think of international relations as something that is distant from them. There are a bunch of guys in Europe in the 1600s, and they made all these decisions, and that's what we're studying. Um, when you talk about something like migration, right, the personal stories of sometimes our students themselves, sometimes their parents or grandparents, right, or for other communities. Perhaps they have a more distant migration experience, but like this is a really profound global process that they have deep connections with. And, by talking about migration and centering it as this is an important topic, right, you are allowing people to think of their history and the history that matters to them personally as something that is also an important subject that should be studied uh, in a rigorous way. That is something that has real academic merit. Right. There also have been really interesting conversations that I've had with my colleagues as we were thinking about, what are the readings that we're going to use to cover some of some of these topics that, I think we addressed before, but probably not as explicitly. Right. So we were really taking a much bigger look at some of the perspectives in international relations that really talk about race. And so we went through different iterations of trying to talk about the ideas of W.B. Du Bois, who wrote very explicitly on a lot of these topics, but who kind of gets ignored by the conventional international relations corpus. Which is not to say that there aren't challenges. One of the challenges I found was initially a lot of the readings we could find that were addressing these issues were written at a level that was hard for an introductory class. So we started with one called Lake and Reynolds, Drawing the Global Color Line. That one was maybe a bit too historical. I switched to one that was really centering the Haitian Revolution as a very central issue in world politics. That one I found as well. Students found that a bit too theoretical. So now I'm trying going back to Du Bois himself and looking at Du Bois's explanations of the origins of the First World War. Um, Right. Related to that, it's also really helped us think more about history because as we address these topics, the thing that I found is a lot of students will say, "This is interesting, but I don't really have the historical background for this." Right? I learned that the founding fathers they came down upon high and they had some stone tablets and they made the perfect utopia, shining city on a hill. Right. People in the United States often don't study history outside the United States. And even their history of the United States may not be sufficiently deep. So what I've realized as well as I'm teaching this is I have to spend some time and say, okay, we're going to talk about history. And it's not just going to be, you know, Europe is fascinating, 1648, Napoleonic Wars, but also let's talk about the Mughal Empire. Let's talk about China. Let's talk about, lots of these really, really large regions that are politically important and that realistically, if we're looking at economic flows, the movement of people, this is actually perhaps where the action is if you're looking at past eras, allowing people to make comparisons to the present. So I think of this as a process, and it's one that is ongoing. As, for instance, AI has changed the way that we are thinking about assignments. That's presenting all sorts of new challenges. A lot of the assessment, the sort of obvious strategy before would be to have targeted homework assignments. Um, the risk is if that's going to be the AI generated response, that it would be terrible for us to address P&D explicitly with the kinds of assignments that LLMs are going to generate. So we've actually gone back to ye olde fashioned blue book exams and targeted essay questions.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's so interesting, right? I keep thinking to that last outcome that talks about emerging technologies, which was really written prior to even thinking about AI. So interesting. So interesting. Thank you so much. And Raj.
Hey everyone, I'm just going to share my screen. Second. All right, can you see my screen? Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. I'm excited to talk to you a little bit different than I think some of the other folks. I'm going to talk more practically about what I've done in my class this semester. My name is Raj Korpan. I'm an assistant professor in the computer science department. And I want to start with how I do in my class, which is with participation. So trying to really think about best practices for encouraging pluralism. So what I'd like is in the chat, if you could type a response to this question, what helps students feel like they belong in a large lecture STEM class? So what is a word, phrase that comes to mind, and just stick it in the chat. Awesome. Thank you. So I'm seeing connection, connecting, feedback, relationship with peers and instructor, learning and groups. Amazing. Now, the challenge is that large lecture STEM courses often feel impersonal by default. And so what I wanted to see is if I could take pluralism-informed teaching practices and make my course feel more personal, more community-oriented, where students feel more connected with each other and with me. So I teach CSCI 150 or Computer Science 150, Discrete Structures. It's an introductory gateway course for computer science majors. And I have about 170 students in the class. I teach it in the large auditorium. I have class later today. And this is typically seen as a high stakes course by students. It is very proof heavy. Students are learning formal logic and proofs. They're learning combinatorics and graph theory, and much of this material is particularly abstract but difficult and unlike math that they've seen before. And so students in this class and classes like it assume that success really depends on their intelligence or how much preparation they've had. And the classes can really feel like they are transactional. Students arrive, they take notes, and then they leave. And so there's this challenge where students feel anonymous, they feel disengaged and isolated, and then they end up avoiding help or avoid seeking help when they're struggling. But in these classes, it really matters whether students feel connected enough to really persist through that difficulty. And so what I wondered was, how do I create community and support structures for my students? So when I'm talking about pluralism in this context, I'm talking about something pretty practical, right? Not just about diversity, but how do I intentionally engage across difference, right? And through respect, relationships, and cooperation. And so even though my students really come in with very different levels of preparation, they're different ages, backgrounds, work schedules, all sorts of identities, when it is a sea of students in the lecture hall, those differences start to become invisible. And so my hope was that I can structure these kind of interactions in class that will make students feel less isolated. So one intervention that I've tried this semester was to begin class, instead of with like passive note taking, is to start each lecture with a collaborative opening sheet. So students, every class start 20 minutes working on an opening sheet. I put students in semester-long groups of 5 or 6 students, and then they work on these opening sheet problems together. And it's really to review kind of course material from the last class, but every sheet also includes a quick-fire type of question prompt to get them talking to each other, to get to know each other. And so the first 20 minutes then are not really about passive note-taking. They're really getting students to engage with each other, to have conversation, to problem solve, but also build relationships. And so hopefully they're building community at the same time as doing. So I'm going to show you a couple examples of these. For example, this one was early on in the semester. I asked, what's your favorite book, movie, or TV show right now? And I had students respond to it. These are all members of the same group. They answered things like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Percy Jackson is an author, One Piece is an anime show, and they get to talk to each other about these. As I move forward in the class, I started to ask more questions about reflection and their experience in the course. So this is another one. What is something you're proud of? Getting in my protein for the week. I'm proud of my strong will, my punctuality. So again, they get to talk about them, reflect about themselves. And then after answering these questions, they do the math. So here are some more examples. What motivates you to keep going on tough days? My family, knowing that I can be stronger, never giving up. What's something you've learned in school or life that you think could help others? Avoid procrastination, have patience, handyman skills. What's one habit you'd like to build? Going out and finding new places, talking and holding conversations with others longer. What's one strength you bring to a group, academic or not? I'm able to communicate my ideas clearly. I ask questions. So these are just some examples. I have 33 groups in the class, and these were just random ones I picked out, but what they demonstrate is that students are really engaging with one another with beyond just the content of the course. So my approach in this was to, one, start with groups that were randomly assigned, that was intentional. It allows me to resist this idea of self-sorting where students are kind of grouping together with people they already know. But I made sure that they were within the same recitation sections. So they would have this continuity between the lecture and the recitation where they're still seeing their group members. I also, throughout my lectures, use other kinds of ways of getting students to communicate and talk with each other, right? Think, pair, share, peer instruction, collaborative problem solving. And then I explicitly emphasize growth mindset, where I talk about how discrete math is difficult and it's normal to feel that it's difficult and to struggle, but that you can improve through practice. I also made sure to answer the prompts myself, right? I wanted students to model that kind of openness I expect to see from my students, and to really reduce that distance between me and my students. So, right, I talked about what's something I'm proud of, being a supportive and encouraging father, right? What's something I've learned, making time for yourself and your family is extremely important to your mental health. So the semester's still in progress, so I don't have kind of like conclusive findings, but kind of preliminary findings I have so far are encouraging. I have had about 83.6% average attendance across the first 21 classes, or about 140 students. And the graph on the left shows kind of attendance over time has stayed pretty consistent. There has not been much drop off, even after the first exam. I know my time is up. I'm almost done. I've only had 10 withdrawals from the original 178 students that were enrolled. The average grade on my first exam was 67.2%. Not great, but compared to a previous semester, last semester, which had an average of 55.8%, it's a pretty big difference. So obviously, I'm not able to draw like a direct causal connection, right? Because the way I'm teaching is and approaching the material is different than the way other faculty have taught this class. But I think students do feel connected and with their peers more and engage more in my class anecdotally. So what didn't work? Well, some students struggled to or got frustrated when their group members were not coming or not showing up. And so building in mechanisms to ensure that there's right this connection, but there's also accountability. Okay. So final takeaways, I think creating sustained small groups really builds this type of community, not just like a one-time icebreaker, and then giving groups meaningful reasons to really talk to each other. And so I think rigor and belonging really are not opposites, right? You can have belonging is really a form of a rigorous course because you want students to feel not just connected to the material, but connected to the community in your course. And so I think students are succeeding not because they just master the content, they feel connected enough to their peers, to their instructor, that they're going to kind of persist when they are having difficulty. Okay. And then just thank you to my colleagues who've taught this class before and have given me a lot of feedback. Thank you to Christina, particularly for really giving me some great feedback and incredible suggestions. And then thank you, Gina and Nikki, for talking about and discussing pluralism. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I love this room so much, and I'm so grateful for all your work. You really like make pluralism alive at Hunter. Without you, it would never exist, right? It would just be forgotten. So I'm so appreciative. The pluralism and diversity initiatives that have been going on have been such a positive change for the entire college and have really changed the way we do things. So I'm so thankful for the people in this room. We have about 6 minutes for questions. Any questions or comments? Go for it, Roberta.
Hi, thank you to everyone, to all of the panelists and everyone else who's here. I don't have a question, I have a suggestion, and I'm going to put Gina on the spot. One of the things that ACERT has been doing is to have these meetings of people who wanted to be online together to write. And as more and more people are integrating aspects of pluralism and diversity into courses that are not currently listed, perhaps ACERT could sponsor a group of people who want to fill out that form that is now in the chat. And perhaps there might be a volunteer from the committee that worked on pluralism and diversity who could be there um, as a person to bounce questions off of as we work on those forms. So it's just a suggestion, Gina.
We love it. I'm going to put it on Christina and I's discussion list, and we'll see what we can come up with. Thank you, Roberta. It's a good suggestion.
Yeah,
Great.
I could just chime in. I would be happy to sit in on that session and advise in whatever way I could. But also, we do I'd certainly like to look at proposals if you have questions about them in the UCSC. And we're always happy to consult with folks before they actually start submitting stuff to curriculum committees. I know that they give you feedback on like the like typographical things on those proposals. But if you had questions about like learning outcome alignments or how to make your assignments or your readings more legible, that's something that we would be happy to do one-on-one. But also, if there was an ACERT program, I would, please keep me in the loop on that. I'd love to join. So, and I have some things to write up myself.
Amazing. Amazing. I just put it on our list. Laz.
Thanks, everyone. So this question is for Chris. I think I know the answer, but some faculty have asked. Previously, I don't recall when we were reviewing submissions that a full syllabus was required. Is a full syllabus required, especially for a new course that somebody is confecting and they really haven't worked out all the kinks, but wants to make sure that all the ducks are in a row for P&D designation? Can they include a partial syllabus, or do they need to include a full one?
I think we need a full syllabus for this. There are a couple of curriculum decisions that don't require a syllabus, but this is one of them that does. And I'm not sure why that is, but it's a rule that came to us probably from GER. And I think maybe in the old dispensation, the P&D change also required a syllabus. I know like writing intensive and just off the top of my head, writing intensive and P&D forms both require a full syllabus. MOIs don't. And that's like the mode of instruction. So, and I don't know why that is, but I do know that's the rule.
Thanks.
And any other questions?
Gina, if you don't mind, if I could just expand a little bit on what was just said.
Yeah.
Unless there's been a change, there's a template for the syllabus that I've seen. I've had to fill it out myself, that goes through the various levels when you're getting something approved. That template tends to have less things to fill out than our usual syllabi. So it's not as onerous as it sounds. So if the template is still there, that might be helpful to people who are concerned about having to do a syllabus.
Yeah, and if I could I have it open, so I could screen share really quickly and just show you where to find this. On the Senate website, these are the templates for all of the proposals. So these are the sort of rules and the regulations. Professor Kilkenny's point about the syllabus form, I think that's in this checklist. So that has everything that you need to have for this syllabus. And then all of these, yeah, so this is designating a course for pluralism and diversity. And all of these also require a cover letter. And this, I think, may be new as well. So if you're in the College of Arts and Sciences, you actually go to the curriculum committee for arts and sciences first before it comes to our committee. So
Thank you. And last.
Thanks all. Just a technical question. I was trying to share with you a flyer about an event that we're having in AFPRL, and I just sent it to Christina to see if she can share it with the group because the interface right now is making it very confusing for my tired eyes. Part of the work that went into that 1993 report was that we need to build co-curricular activities to reinforce what happens in the classroom, because without it, it becomes very difficult. And one of the challenges that we have on campus, being a vertical campus, is that we don't have any sort of way to reserve rooms way in advance. So we're always behind the 8 ball, but we were able to secure a room for a presentation that we're going to have this afternoon by the New Americanist Don Pease, who's joining us from Dartmouth College, and he'll be talking about C.L.R. James' classic Mariners, Renegades, and Castaways. And the title of his presentation is Caliban on Ellis Island, How C.L.R. James Exits the Empire of Security. I've shared the flyer with Christina, and Christina, if you could just share it with everyone. I'm sorry, I am the Zoom village idiot, apparently. So thanks for that.
Thank
It
you.
just took a moment to come through, I think, because it's a large file. So I'll add it to the notes.
Thank you.
I think it's the Zoom ship of fools, and we're all aboard. So
There's a new interface every time. Every time there's a new interface, a new update.
It's always ever changing. Any last questions? Well, thank you all so much. Another round of applause for our incredible presenters. You are all amazing. We're so grateful for all you do at the college. Have a beautiful Thursday. Thank you. Thank you. Come to an ACERT event soon. Go to Laz's event as well, and we'll see you soon. Bye, everybody. Have the best day. This was one of the great sessions that made me happy for all of us.